It was a bright and warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that made the city streets feel alive. People were walking around, some with coffee in hand, others window shopping, children laughing as they ran past street performers, and the hum of traffic creating a constant background melody. At the corner of a busy street, a group of bikers had parked their motorcycles. The engines roared every now and then, echoing through the street, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Among them, one biker stood out. He was tall, heavily tattooed, wearing a leather jacket, and had a smirk that made it clear he enjoyed the attention he got. Not far from them, a young black girl was walking toward her home from school. She was around 18 with a bright smile and an energetic step. Her backpack hung loosely on her shoulders and music played softly from her headphones. She was in her own world, enjoying the last bit of sunlight, humming along quietly with a song. Her day had been normal so far, just classes, chatting with friends, and the usual errands after school. As she walked past the group of bikers, she didn't notice the tall biker who had been leaning against his motorcycle, eyes scanning the crowd. He was looking for someone to tease, someone who could give him the satisfaction of making another person feel small. And in that moment, the girl accidentally brushed against him as she adjusted her backpack. It was a small collision, almost unnoticeable, but enough for the biker to see an opportunity. He immediately straightened up, towering over her with a loud, mocking laugh. "Hey, watch where you're going, girl," he shouted, the words carrying across the street. The biker's friends chuckled, leaning on their motorcycles, enjoying the scene about to unfold. The girl froze for a moment, her hand instinctively gripping her backpack strap, unsure whether to respond. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice soft but sincere. She tried to step aside, hoping he would ignore her and move on, but the biker wasn't interested in letting her go so easily. He leaned in closer, smirking down at her. "Sorry isn't going to cut it," he said. "You need to learn some manners. Or maybe you just like embarrassing yourself in front of everyone." The girl's heart started to race. People passing by slowed down, some looking uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene. A few stopped, whispering to each other, watching the interaction unfold. But no one stepped forward just yet. The girl felt her face grow hot, and for the first time that day, she wished she could just disappear. "I didn't mean to bump into you," she said again, trying to keep her voice calm. "It was an accident." But the biker only laughed louder, a harsh, grating sound. "Accident, really? You think just saying that makes it okay?" he mocked. "You look like someone who needs a lesson in respect." His friends laughed, echoing his cruelty, making the girl feel smaller and more exposed. She wanted to leave, to escape the humiliation, but she also didn't want to run. She knew walking away might make the biker think he had won, so she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her hands were shaking slightly and her knees felt weak, but she lifted her chin and looked him in the eye. "Please stop. You're hurting people with your words," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The biker tilted his head, clearly amused by her attempt to stand up for herself. "Hurt people? Who's hurting anyone? I'm just having some fun," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Relax, little girl. Don't take it so seriously." His tone was mocking, patronizing, as if she were a child who didn't understand the world. People around them were starting to record the scene on their phones. A few whispered encouragement to her, but the biker didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying the attention, laughing at her discomfort. The girl felt trapped, her options limited. She could either continue arguing and risk further embarrassment or try to leave quietly, hoping he wouldn't follow. Just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. A large man walked toward the biker and the girl, his presence commanding attention. People started murmuring, pointing, recognizing him from TV and movies. The man had a calm but strong aura, and even from a distance, the biker seemed to notice something different about him. The girl barely registered him at first, too focused on trying to protect herself. But as the man came closer, she realized he wasn't just another passerby. He had a steady, confident stride, and there was a kind of authority in the way he moved, as if he didn't need to shout or push to command respect. Her heart skipped a beat. Who was this person? She could feel the tension in the air shift slightly, a subtle but important change. The biker, however, didn't recognize the man at first. He just smirked, thinking this was someone else who might get in his way. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone defensive but still mocking. He was used to people being afraid of him. and he expected this man to be no different. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at the girl, then at the biker. His eyes were calm but piercing, as if he could see right through the biker's act. "You shouldn't treat people like that," he said quietly, but with a voice that carried authority. "Especially someone who hasn't done anything to you." The biker laughed nervously, trying to mask his discomfort. "And who are you supposed to be?" "Her bodyguard." He joked, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He could feel the difference in energy, the way people were now watching him, noticing his behavior. The girl felt a mix of relief and disbelief. She didn't know who this man was, but somehow just seeing him made her feel safer. She could feel her shoulders relax slightly, and the fear that had gripped her moments ago started to ease. It was strange how one person's presence could change everything, even when the danger seemed so immediate. The man stepped a little closer, not threatening, just assertive. "It's not okay to humiliate someone in public," he said. "Words can hurt as much as actions. You should think about that before speaking." His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the seriousness behind it. The biker swallowed hard, realizing that he might have underestimated the situation. Around them, the crowd began to shift as well. People who had been standing silently now whispered to each other, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads at the biker's behavior. The dynamic had changed. The biker was no longer the one holding the power in this moment. The girl took a shaky breath, still processing everything. She had been humiliated, embarrassed, and scared, but now there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe the situation didn't have to end badly. Maybe, just maybe, someone would step in to stop the cruelty she had endured. The biker shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the man who had spoken. There was a brief moment of silence, tense and heavy, where the biker realized he couldn't just push this girl around in front of everyone, not with this man watching. His smirk faltered, replaced by a nervous laugh that didn't reach his eyes. The girl, though still trembling slightly, felt a spark of courage. She had stood up for herself once, and now she wasn't alone. The presence of this man gave her strength, a reminder that she didn't have to face humiliation on her own. People around them were starting to pay attention, some filming, some just watching, but all aware that something had shifted. As the sun continued to shine down on the street, the scene was no longer just about a biker mocking a girl. It had become a moment where courage, presence, and human decency began to tip the scales. And while the girl didn't know it yet, this moment would mark the beginning of a story she would remember for the rest of her life. One where fear met courage, and unexpected help arrived just when it was needed most. The girl's heart was still racing as she watched the man approach. There was something calm and strong about the way he moved. Even though she had been scared and humiliated moments ago, she felt a little hope now. She didn't know who he was, but she could sense that he wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. The biker, on the other hand, was starting to feel uncomfortable. He had spent so much of his life trying to appear tough and fearless, but something about this man made him pause. He laughed nervously and glanced at his friends, who were now quiet and looking around, unsure of what to do. The energy on the street had shifted, and for the first time that day, the biker felt like he had lost control of the situation. The girl took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her hands were still shaking, but she could feel the tension in the air changing. She had spoken up before, but now she wasn't alone. She felt a little stronger knowing that someone was there who could help her. She had no idea who this man was, but just his presence made a difference. The man stopped a few feet away from the biker and looked him in the eye. He didn't shout or yell. He didn't make threats. He just spoke calmly but with authority. "It's not right to humiliate someone in public," he said. "You never know how much words can hurt. You should think about that before you speak." The biker blinked, taken aback. He had expected someone to either ignore him or back down, but this man wasn't intimidated. The biker's friends shifted uncomfortably, and some of the people who had been watching whispered to each other, recognizing the change in the situation. The crowd seemed to sense that the balance of power had shifted, and all eyes were now on the biker. The girl felt a strange mix of relief and awe. She had been scared, embarrassed, and humiliated, but now she realized she might actually get through this without more harm. The man's words and calm presence made her feel safer, and for the first time since the incident started, she wasn't sure she would have to face this alone. The biker tried to laugh, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And who are you supposed to be?" he said, trying to sound confident. "Her bodyguard? Are you here to save her or something?" His words were meant to provoke, but the man didn't react in anger. Instead, he just looked at him calmly, his gaze steady. "I'm here to remind you that what you're doing is wrong," the man said. "No one deserves to be humiliated for no reason. You can choose to act better, starting right now." The biker laughed nervously again, clearly unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being confronted calmly and firmly. Most of the time, people either walked away or argued with him, but they didn't have the same presence this man had. Even the girl could see that he was starting to regret his actions. The girl took another deep breath and tried to speak. Her voice was still a little shaky, but she said, "Please, just stop. I don't understand why you are treating me like this." The biker turned to look at her, and for a moment it seemed like he might continue, but then he glanced at the man standing nearby and hesitated. There was something in the man's eyes, something that made the biker pause. He could feel the crowd's attention on him, and he suddenly realized that his behavior was being watched by more people than he had imagined. The man stepped a little closer, not threateningly, but with purpose. "Words matter," he said. "What you say can hurt someone deeply. Humiliating someone in public shows weakness, not strength. You have a choice to act better. Right now, you can choose to do the right thing." The biker swallowed hard, looking around at the growing crowd. Some people were still recording the scene on their phones, while others whispered to each other about what was happening. The energy of the street had changed completely. No longer was this just a biker mocking a girl. Now everyone could see the truth of the situation. One person was being cruel and someone else was standing up to ensure fairness. The girl felt a wave of courage wash over her. She didn't have to feel ashamed anymore. She had tried to defend herself, and now someone else was helping make sure she wasn't treated unfairly. Her shoulders lifted slightly and she felt a little more confident. She realized that standing up for herself had been the right choice, even if it had been scary at first. The biker tried to laugh it off again, but it sounded forced and hollow. Fine, I'll stop," he muttered. But it was clear that he didn't fully believe it. The man nodded calmly, acknowledging the words but not letting the biker off the hook entirely. "Good," the man said. "Now it's important to apologize. Not just to say the words, but to truly understand that what you did was wrong." The biker looked down, embarrassed. He was not used to being confronted like this in public, especially not by someone so calm and strong. He muttered a weak apology, barely audible, but the man made sure he understood that it needed to be genuine. The girl felt a mix of relief and disbelief. She had been humiliated, and for a moment she thought she might never get out of this situation without feeling worse. But now, thanks to the presence of this stranger, the biker had been forced to stop and apologize. She felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe this could end without further conflict. The man then turned to her, offering a reassuring smile. "You are brave to speak up," he said. "Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when someone is trying to humiliate you. But you did it, and that matters." The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had expected to be scolded or ignored, but instead, this man was encouraging her. His words gave her strength, and she felt a sense of pride she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that courage wasn't just about not being afraid. It was about facing fear and taking action anyway. The crowd around them started to relax slightly. The tension that had built up over the past few minutes began to ease. People whispered to each other, some nodding in agreement, others quietly applauding the girl's bravery. The biker, meanwhile, looked increasingly uncomfortable. He had expected this to be a moment of dominance, but instead, it had turned into a lesson about respect. The girl felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had endured humiliation, fear, and embarrassment, but now she felt supported. She realized that even when things seemed bad, there were always people willing to do the right thing, and sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. The man stayed a few steps behind her, not interfering further but ready to step in if needed. His presence was a silent reassurance, a reminder that she wasn't alone. The girl took a deep breath, feeling a mix of gratitude and awe. She had faced something difficult and she had come out stronger, thanks in part to this stranger who had stepped in at the right moment. The biker finally muttered a more sincere apology, looking down at his boots. He had learned in that brief but intense moment that power wasn't about intimidation or cruelty. True strength came from respect, understanding, and the courage to do what was right. The girl nodded slightly, accepting the apology, though her mind was still racing with everything that had happened. She realized she had been tested and she had passed. She had shown courage, and she had received support when she needed it most. As the sun continued to shine down on the street, the scene began to settle. The biker and his friends walked away quietly, the crowd slowly dispersing, and the girl felt a sense of relief she hadn't known earlier. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, but she had also witnessed kindness, strength, and fairness. For the girl, this was more than just a confrontation on the street. It was a lesson about courage, humanity, and the importance of standing up for oneself. And though she didn't fully understand it yet, she knew this day would stay with her forever. A story of fear, bravery, and unexpected help when it mattered most. The street had quieted slightly, but the energy in the air was far from calm. People had stopped, some lingering to see what would happen next. The biker's friends shifted nervously, realizing that the confident man standing nearby wasn't someone to provoke. The girl, still trembling slightly from the earlier humiliation, could feel her heart racing. But this time it wasn't fear, it was anticipation, curiosity, and a bit of relief. The man's calm presence seemed to make everyone around take notice. People who had been whispering started to look at the biker, waiting to see if he would finally take responsibility for his actions. The biker shifted from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. He had spent his life relying on intimidation, but this situation felt different. For the first time, he couldn't rely on fear to control the people around him. The girl took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. She had survived the initial embarrassment, but she still felt a little shaken. She looked at the man, noticing how steady and confident he appeared. He wasn't yelling or showing anger, yet there was no mistaking the authority in his voice and posture. She wondered who he was. He seemed like someone who had seen many difficult situations before, someone who knew how to handle people without aggression. "Look," the man said, his voice calm but firm, "humiliating someone isn't strength. It's weakness. And everyone here can see that." The biker laughed, but it sounded hollow. He looked around at the crowd and saw people recording with their phones, whispering to each other and staring at him in disapproval. His confidence began to falter. He had thought he could intimidate the girl, make her feel small and leave without consequence. Now he realized that the situation had completely flipped. "Whatever," the biker muttered, but there was a tremor in his voice. He tried to make a joke, attempting to regain some sense of control. "It's just a little fun. People take things too seriously these days." The man shook his head slowly, unimpressed. "Fun? Mocking someone, making them feel humiliated in public and thinking it's entertainment. That's not fun. That's cruelty, and you can choose to act differently right now." The girl felt a flicker of courage. She realized that she didn't have to be silent anymore. With the man nearby supporting her, she could finally feel safe enough to speak her mind. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's not funny. You're hurting people, and it's not okay." The biker looked at her and smirked, but it was more nervous than confident this time. He tried to laugh, but it came out awkwardly. The girl could see that he was beginning to understand that his usual tactics weren't working. People were watching, recording, judging him, and he didn't like it. The man nodded toward her, subtly giving her reassurance. "That's right. Speak up, tell the truth. Don't let anyone make you feel small." The girl took another deep breath and continued. "I don't know why you thought it was okay to humiliate me. I didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't treat people this way." The biker's friends looked uneasy. They had been following his lead, cheering him on, but now they realized that the situation was out of their control. They shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or back away. The biker himself noticed the change and felt his authority slipping away. The man stepped a little closer to the biker, not aggressively but with intention. "Apologize. Not just to say words, but to really understand that what you did was wrong," he instructed. The biker hesitated. He had never been told to apologize like this in public. Most people either laughed along with him or avoided conflict. But now the calm authority of this man made it clear that excuses wouldn't work. He muttered a weak apology, his eyes flicking toward the ground. The words were barely audible, but it was a start. The girl felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been humiliated, scared, and embarrassed, but now there was a shift. The biker had been forced to acknowledge what he had done, even if only partially. She realized that standing her ground had made a difference, especially with the support of someone who knew how to handle such a situation. The crowd began to sense the change too. People who had been quietly watching whispered to each other, some nodding in approval. They could see that the girl had shown courage and the biker's authority had crumbled. The energy of the street shifted from tension and fear to cautious relief and admiration for her bravery. The biker's friends nudged him, murmuring that it was time to leave. He hesitated, his pride wounded, but he finally nodded and started to step away. The man stayed close, making sure the girl felt safe. The biker's retreat was slow and awkward, and he couldn't ignore the stares of the crowd that now regarded him with disapproval. The girl let out a small sigh, realizing that the worst of the encounter was over. She felt her shoulders relax slightly, and a small smile appeared on her face. The man looked at her and gave a subtle nod, acknowledging her bravery. "You handled that very well," he said. "It's not easy to face humiliation and stay strong, but you did it." The girl's heart swelled with gratitude. She had been terrified moments ago, but now she felt empowered. She realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing up in spite of it. And she had done exactly that. The crowd slowly dispersed, some still whispering about what they had just witnessed. Phones were put away, but the impact of the moment lingered. The girl could feel people's admiration and respect, and it gave her a renewed sense of confidence. The man stayed a few steps behind her as she began to walk, not rushing or forcing her to leave, but making sure she felt safe. She realized that his presence had been key to changing the entire dynamic. Without him, she might still have been facing humiliation, alone and afraid. As they walked together a short distance, the man spoke again, gently and encouragingly. "Remember, you have every right to defend yourself. People shouldn't make you feel small, and sometimes it's okay to accept help when it comes from the right place." The girl nodded, feeling a mix of relief and inspiration. She had learned something important that day. Standing up for yourself was powerful, but having support could make the difference between fear and courage. The biker was long gone now, retreating down the street with his friends, but the lesson remained. He had underestimated the girl and the situation, and now he had been forced to confront the truth about his behavior. The girl, on the other hand, had grown stronger. She had faced humiliation, spoken up, and survived. And she had learned that courage often comes from unexpected sources. The man gave her one last reassuring smile. "You'll remember this day," he said softly. "Not because of what happened, but because of how you handled it. That's what matters." The girl looked at him, feeling a mix of awe and gratitude. She had come so close to feeling defeated, but instead she walked away with her dignity intact, a sense of empowerment, and a story that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As the sun continued to shine on the street, the energy of the day slowly returned to normal. People resumed their routines, children continued to play, and the hum of traffic filled the air once again. But for the girl, this day would never be ordinary. It was a day of fear, courage, and unexpected kindness, a moment when she realized that standing up for herself and accepting help could change everything. Even as she walked home, replaying the events in her mind, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. She had faced something difficult, something meant to make her feel small, but she had survived, and she had done so with courage. And somewhere nearby, the man who had helped her walked away quietly, leaving her with the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, human decency and bravery could make all the difference. The street had finally settled down, but the memory of what had just happened lingered in the air. The girl's heart was still beating fast, a mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. She could hardly believe that the situation, which had seemed so terrifying moments ago, had turned around completely. The biker and his friends had left slowly and awkwardly, their pride visibly wounded. Yet the girl knew this wasn't just about them leaving. It was about how she had handled herself, and how the presence of the calm, strong man had made all the difference. The man stayed nearby, walking a few steps behind her as she began to move along the sidewalk. He didn't rush her or push her to move faster. He let her set the pace, quietly ensuring she felt safe and supported. The girl's mind was still racing, replaying every word, every glance, every tense second of the confrontation. But now, instead of fear, she felt a growing sense of empowerment. "You did very well back there," the man said gently. "It takes courage to stand up when someone is trying to make you feel small. Many people would have frozen or walked away. You faced it." The girl's lips curved into a small, tentative smile. I didn't know what to do at first," she admitted, her voice soft. "I just wanted it to stop, and I didn't want to feel embarrassed in front of everyone." "That's normal," the man replied. feeling scared, wanting to hide, wanting the problem to go away. It's human. But you didn't give up. You spoke up, and that shows strength. The girl nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that she had not only survived a terrifying moment, but she had also learned an important lesson about courage. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing your ground, even when your heart is pounding and your hands are shaking. They walked for a few minutes in silence, just moving through the crowd that was slowly returning to its usual rhythm. Street vendors called out, children laughed, and the distant hum of traffic filled the air. The normalcy of the world felt almost surreal compared to the intensity of the confrontation she had just endured. You know, the man continued, breaking the silence. Sometimes the world puts us in difficult situations to teach us lessons. It might not feel fair and it might feel overwhelming, but these moments can show us how strong we really are. The girl thought about his words. She remembered the biker's mocking laugh, the way he had tried to make her feel small and the way she had initially frozen. But she also remembered how she had spoken up, how she had taken a deep breath and found her voice. She realized he was right. She had faced something uncomfortable and she had handled it with courage. I guess. I never thought I could stand up to someone like that, she said quietly. I always thought I'd just walk away or let them have their way. But today I didn't. I spoke up. That's important, the man said. Standing up for yourself, even in small ways, builds confidence. It teaches others that you deserve respect. And it also teaches you that you can handle challenges even when they seem scary. The girl smiled a little more now, feeling the weight of the fear she had carried begin to lift. She thought about the way people had looked at her during the confrontation, some in admiration, some in surprise. She realized that her actions had not only affected herself, but had also influenced those around her. Her courage had sent a message. Cruelty would not be tolerated, and standing up for oneself matters. As they continued walking, the man glanced around, ensuring the street was clear and that no one else posed a threat. His calm presence continued to reassure her, and she felt a growing sense of gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. I don't even know your name, but thank you for stepping in. The man smiled kindly. You're welcome. But remember, the courage was always yours. I just helped make sure the situation didn't get worse. You were the one who faced him and spoke up. She nodded, understanding. The lesson wasn't about relying on someone else to fix everything. It was about finding the strength within herself while accepting help when needed. She realized that it was okay to lean on someone in difficult moments, but it was her courage that truly mattered. The girl paused for a moment, looking down at her feet, then back at the street. She saw people going about their lives unaware of the intense moment that had just taken place. It made her feel both small and strong at the same time. Small because the world was so big, and moments like these could feel insignificant. Strong because she had faced a challenge head-on and had come out with her dignity intact. The man noticed her pause and said, Sometimes it's the small moments that teach the biggest lessons. You'll remember this day not because of what happened, but because of how you handled it. The girl took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She thought about the biker's mocking laughter, the tension that had filled the air and the fear she had felt. And then she thought about how she had spoken up, how the man had intervened, and how the situation had changed because she refused to back down completely. She realized that she had gained something valuable: confidence, courage, and a sense of self-respect. As they reached a quieter part of the street away from the crowd, the girl finally slowed her pace. She looked up at the man and said, I feel different now. Stronger, I guess, like I can handle more than I thought. That's exactly it, he said. Challenges don't disappear, but how we face them shapes who we are. You faced fear, embarrassment, and uncertainty, and you came through. That's something to be proud of. The girl smiled more openly now, feeling a sense of accomplishment that made the events of the past minutes feel less heavy. She realized that the humiliation she had experienced wasn't the end of her story. It was a part of her growth, a moment that showed her what she was capable of. They continued walking together for a little longer, the man offering quiet guidance and reassurance. He didn't lecture or scold. He simply reminded her that she had the strength to handle difficult situations and that standing up for herself was always the right choice. Eventually, they reached the corner where their paths would separate. The girl felt a pang of gratitude mixed with awe. She had been terrified just minutes ago, unsure of what would happen, and now she felt empowered, safe, and understood. The man looked at her with a kind expression. Remember this, courage is not about never being afraid. It's about facing fear and doing the right thing anyway. You've shown that today, and it will serve you well in the future. The girl nodded, feeling a sense of clarity and confidence she hadn't felt before. She realized that the experience had taught her more than just how to deal with one bully. It had taught her about resilience, bravery, and human kindness, and they parted ways. The girl walked toward her home with a lighter step. She replayed the events in her mind, remembering the fear, the tension, and the courage she had found. She knew she would never forget this day, not because of the humiliation, but because of the strength she had discovered within herself and the unexpected support she had received. For the first time since the encounter began, she felt truly proud of herself. She had been tested and she had passed. She had faced someone who tried to belittle her and she had stood tall. She had learned that courage could come in moments of fear, that support could appear when needed, and that self-respect was worth defending no matter the circumstances. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. The girl looked around at the city, the people, and the bustling world, feeling a quiet sense of triumph. The world could be intimidating, unfair, and challenging, but she had discovered that she could navigate it with courage and dignity. And though the memory of the biker's mocking laugh would remain, it was now accompanied by the memory of her own bravery, the calm authority of the man who had helped, and the knowledge that she had faced a difficult moment and emerged stronger. As she turned the corner toward her neighborhood, she carried with her a new sense of confidence. The encounter had changed her, not just by teaching her how to handle humiliation, but by showing her that courage, support, and dignity could transform even the most difficult situations. The girl walked down the quiet street, her backpack feeling lighter on her shoulders than it had before. The sun was beginning to dip behind the buildings, casting golden light over the sidewalks and making the city feel calm after the tension-filled afternoon. She could still feel her heart beating, but now it was a steady rhythm, not the frantic pounding it had been during the confrontation with the biker. Her mind replayed everything that had happened, from the initial humiliation to the unexpected intervention. She felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, pride, and awe. Relief because the situation had ended without further trouble. Pride because she had found her voice and stood up for herself when it had seemed impossible. And awe because of the unexpected kindness of the man who had stepped in. His presence had been quiet but powerful, and she realized how much it had changed the outcome. As she walked, she thought about the lessons she had learned that day. She realized that courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about acting even when fear was present. It was about facing uncomfortable situations and refusing to let them define you. She had experienced humiliation and fear, but she had responded with dignity and strength, and that made all the difference. She also thought about the idea of support. The man who had helped her had not shouted or forced anyone to do anything. He had simply stood in the right place at the right time and acted with calm authority. His intervention had been enough to change the dynamics completely. The girl realized that sometimes courage came in the form of help from someone else, and that accepting it didn't make you weak, it made you wise. As she turned another corner, she noticed a few people glancing at her and whispering. Some of them had seen the incident unfold, and she realized that her bravery had been witnessed by more people than she had thought. A few of them smiled at her as she passed, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. She felt a small, warm sense of satisfaction. She had faced fear, stood up for herself, and inspired others in the process. The girl's mind wandered to the biker and his friends. She imagined how embarrassed he must have felt when the man had confronted him. She knew that for someone like him, used to dominating through intimidation, being challenged in public must have been humiliating. She felt a little sympathy for him, realizing that his behavior came from a place of insecurity and a desire to appear strong. But she also understood that she didn't have to excuse it. He had to face the consequences of his actions, and she had made sure that happened in her own quiet, brave way. As she walked further, she began to think about the future. She knew that she would carry the memory of this day with her. It would serve as a reminder that she was stronger than she had realized, that even in moments of fear she could find courage, that standing up for herself even in small ways mattered, and that sometimes unexpected kindness and support could make all the difference in the world. The girl's pace slowed as she approached her neighborhood. The familiar streets felt comforting after the chaos of the afternoon. She saw children playing in the yards, neighbors chatting on porches, and the usual rhythm of life continuing around her. The world seemed normal again, but she knew she had changed. She had faced a challenge and emerged stronger, and that knowledge gave her a quiet sense of empowerment. She also thought about the people who had been watching during the confrontation. Some had been unsure whether to step in, some had recorded the scene, and others had simply watched in silence. She realized that her courage, combined with the presence of the man who had helped, had influenced everyone around her. Even those who had not spoken up had witnessed the power of standing up for what is right. She felt a sense of connection to the crowd, as if they had all been part of this small but important moment of humanity. The girl's thoughts then turned back to the man who had helped her. She didn't know his name, and she didn't need to. His actions had spoken louder than words. He had reminded her that strength and kindness could coexist, that one could act with authority without cruelty, and that sometimes being in the right place at the right time could change someone's life. She felt grateful for his presence and hoped that she could carry forward the lessons she had learned from him. As she continued walking, she began to reflect on the idea of respect. She realized that the biker's behavior had been a clear example of what happens when someone fails to respect others, and she understood that standing up for oneself was not just about defending personal dignity. It was about sending a message that respect is essential in human interactions. Her own actions, her refusal to be humiliated, and the support she had received all reinforced that message. The girl also thought about how fear can make people feel powerless. She had felt powerless when the biker first began mocking her. Her hands had trembled, her voice had wavered, and she had wanted nothing more than to escape. But by taking a deep breath, finding her voice, and accepting help, she had transformed that fear into action. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She walked a little further and passed a small park where families were enjoying the late afternoon. Children ran around laughing, dogs chased balls, and parents watched with smiles. The normalcy of the scene made her feel grounded. She had faced an intense, scary moment, but life continued, and she could continue too, with a newfound sense of strength. The girl's mind drifted to the idea of self-worth. She realized that no one had the right to make her feel small or insignificant. Her value was not determined by someone else's opinion or behavior. She had stood up for herself, asserted her dignity, and shown that she mattered. That understanding gave her a deep sense of confidence, one that would stay with her long after the events of the day were over. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the neighborhood, the girl felt a quiet sense of peace. The fear and tension of the afternoon had passed, replaced by calm, reflection, and pride. She had faced a challenge, learned from it, and,